and welcome to Wrestling Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo, Esquire, and wrestling's premier photographer, Mike Lano. Dr. Mike Lano, do you want to introduce our guest for tonight?
All right. We have joining us back on the show, my friend since the 70s, like 74, Allan Bolte, the great Allan Bolte, yes. Shire's numero uno ring announcer from, I think, November, December 1973 until Roy closed the office. He also did the program, a sensational job on what was a magazine program. And our mutual friend, who was just honored again for the second time, one of the very few to be honored twice by Cauliflower Alley, in wrestler, movie and TV star, bon vivant, well-cultured man, in Mr. Outrageous, Al Burke, the great Al Burke, who is wearing a... Tell Allan and me too, is that like Andre? Because I only see a tiny picture of it, but it looks like Andre from 93 period.
Well, it's a t-shirt that was made up for a movie premiere that I went to, and it was all about, the wrestling world. But I was one of the fortunate ones that was able to step in the ring with Andre. Most people were only fans or saw him on TV. I was actually in the ring with that big old monster twice.
Was that, where was that, at a Herb Abrams UWF? Or?
No, that was WWF. That was Vince McMahon.
Okay.
It was Colossal Connection. The first time I faced them, they were not tag team champions. They were just, working their way up. And about a month or two, maybe three later, I faced them again when they were the WWF tag team champions of the world.
That is Haku Ming and, of course, Andre the Giant, who...
Andre, yeah.
Yeah, and Allan, of course, I remember Andre's first match in LA because my primary territory was Los Angeles for Mike LaBelle, shooting ringside for the program and the magazines. But then I would come up and Allan would always help me get press. And soon San Francisco was my secondary territory home base until I moved up there and shot all the, last 3 years of Roy's promotion. But Allan Bolte, since we're talking Andre, you have about a jillion memories of Andre coming into the Cow Palace. He was
amazing. And Mr. Outrageous, good to see you.
Allan Bolte, I miss you, brother. It's been a lot of years.
We've kept in touch. We've never been together for a long time, but you look great.
Thank you. You do too.
Thank you. I know you've done a lot of little movie flicks and such, and good for you. I have a poster behind me of Andre. If you can see that, Richmond Auditorium. Is that coming on the screen?
Oh, yeah, I can see it. It's,
Andre.
Yeah, it's Mr. Saito and the Masked Invaders.
Yeah. At any time Andre would appear in the Bay Area when Roy would bring him in, every single city was totally sold out. San Jose, Sacramento, San Francisco, Fresno, Stockton, anywhere. And Andre was just such a nice guy. He stayed, Patterson had his beautiful house in Redwood City at the time, and he would often stay with them and the whole group. Pat would help drive him around. Just a real nice guy, big heart. If we ever went out, met up for drinks or something, Andre would always pick up the tab. Just so sad that he died so young. And
what did he order? That was always a part of the legendary thing when people talk about Andre.
I know that he ordered 2 pizzas for himself. I know that. I know. But he told me a couple of times when we were together that he hurts. He hurts so much. Even when he's on a king-size bed at the hotel, his feet are dangling out 2 feet. On a plane, even if he has 2 seats, he was often always hurting. And that's why his doctor would always say, keep wrestling, do what you're doing, climb way over the top ropes, get exercise, do your stretching. Just a really good person. And Mike, I think you know about the history when he first came to the U.S. from France, spoke very little English.
He came in, actually, he went in 68, 69, because he was already wrestling in France. Then he was sent to Japan, and he had like the 2 best possible people that were kind of babysitting him in the ring, and that was Billy Robinson and Carl Gotch for the old IWE promotion well before, and he was billed as Monster Rusimov, not Andre yet. But then basically the Vachon brothers and Ed Carpentier brought him into Montreal. They were given the Iggy by Carl Gotch, and Andre spent about 14 to 16 months in Montreal as a lumberjack character. The name was Jean Ferret. It was a long time, 100-year-old character, sort of like Tiger Mask in Japan, but Jean Ferret was that name. Of course, Vince McMahon then signed him through the Vachons. This was in their territory Grand Prix in Montreal, like 72 to 73. So Andre was getting more training, tagging up with Ed Carpentier, but working singles and tags with Don Leo Jonathan and Killer Kowalski. So you could have no better people. And then Maurice and Paul Vachon, you could have no better people, as Al knows all of those names, to sort of finesse you before Vince McMahon Sr. started booking him, starting in 73. And soon after he came into our territory, first guy he faced in a battle of the Giants was Ernie Ladd. But Al, let me ask you, we'll go back to more on Andre, did you grow up in my neck of the woods, SoCal? And if so, did you watch all the Tolis Blassie, all of that stuff? Or did you grow up somewhere else and discover wrestling?
This, Al?
Yeah.
Mr. Outrageous. We'll have to, too many Al's.
Al. I always call him Allan, and we don't.
Outrageous.
Outrageous, yeah.
Because he's outrageous.
Hey, wait, is that shirt from Mickey and Maude? What is that shirt from? Which movie, or something different?
It was, At What Cost was the name of the movie. It was almost like a documentary.
Wow, interesting. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, we had a premiere down here, and I was actually at the premiere with like Sin Bodhi, who did, a quick stint with WWE. He was very upset he didn't make the WWF days. But, I was teasing him like, oh, how many times did you step in the ring with Andre? Oh, never. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, no, he was Keith Zarni much later, like in the 90s.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Outrageous, can you tell me where the origin for the Mr. Outrageous name came from?
Oh no, we're on public TV kind of thing. I can't tell you that.
No, this is not public TV. This is the internet. In fact, the more explicit you are, probably the more ratings I'll get. So go right ahead.
Well, let's just say I kept my my promoter up one night when my girlfriend came into town, and he said, it would stop for like a half hour and then it would start again. He goes, I didn't get any sleep. He goes, that was the most outrageous night I've ever had. And so there I got the Mr. Outrageous.
Question, which Buddy will appreciate. So how did you discover wrestling? Did you grow up in Southern Cal on LaBelle Wrestling, Mike LaBelle Wrestling?
I actually came out of Minnesota, don't you know?
Okay, so Vern Gagne, AWA.
Gagne, AWA. Andre did his tours through there, like he, would go to each territory and work for a bit. And so through my childhood, I was taken to the matches, and that was, kind of fun. And then, my teenage years.
What year and what stars did you see? I mean, were you there? Obviously, Crusher, Dick the Bruiser, maybe Billy Graham was there. I don't know how old you are, but
I remember him, but I remember Crusher and Bruiser, of course. Vern, that was before Greg had even, been able to, fit a pair of boots on. But anyways, those were, Jerry Blackwell, I'm thinking. A lot of those guys came through. So, and then for my teenage years, I really dropped out of wrestling, wasn't a fan. Got into, high school football, of course, and one of our football coaches was actually the wrestling coach also, and wanted me to come out for wrestling. I'm like, no, God, I'm not into rolling around with guys. I'm into girls. Sorry. So, being from Minnesota, I went out and played hockey. Sadly, I was the most penalized player in the league, and I also played the goalie. So nobody came near my net.
But who broke you in? How did you then break in to become a wrestler?
One of the guys who was the Terminators at the time was trained by Eddie Sharkey. And then he became Eddie's top trainer there in Minneapolis. I believe it was like mid to later 90s or 80s. I'm sorry. And so Dan Rignati, who's known as Riggs, him and I knew each other, and he knew my background in boxing, karate, bare knuckle fighting. all that kind of stuff, and thought I'd be a good fit for this crazy business of pro wrestling. And yeah, I did 37 years of it. So I've been very blessed. I've been lucky. But, I worked hard to do it, too. And I got to meet guys like Allan Bolte when
There you go.
we were talking earlier. Woody Farmer brought me up. Jerry Monty brought me up. I don't think those guys were really friends, but, I told them, there's no fighting over me. I work for whoever I want to. Don't play games. And I think Woody...
Cordial. Allan, you remember, they were cordial, but you remember I would nag each of them. Why don't you guys, the three of you, Woody, Jerry Monty, who was a longtime Shire,
Right.
was
Yeah.
Woody. And
they always had a little bit of friction. They each promoted different towns. They didn't really work together. They got along well, but yeah, I remember that. And Alexis Smirnoff, after he had wrestled for several years, kind of became involved in the promotion as well here in Northern California. And Mike, I remember when you had the TV show going in Newark, Fremont, Canvas
Well,
Cavity.
we popped back and forth. The bigger studio was it was actually Hayward near Roland's Dojo off the Winton exit 880, but also right in my neighborhood of Alameda. It was went through a number of things, but it ended up going from United Artists Television to Comcast Cable. And Al doesn't even know. I had a number of This Is Your Life shows two for Ray Stevens, two for
Pepper Gomez,
Pepper, Kenji, Mitsu Arakawa. And then we did several joint ones, like for Walt Harris, who was Roy Shire's first announcer.
yes,
Was legit. He was the legit. He called San Francisco Giants baseball games. He was the lead guy in the evening news. So he was calling Roy's action at the same time he was calling Jerry Seltzer's roller derby, his international roller derby league, both based Roy Shire, Jerry Seltzer's derby, both based out of San Francisco Bay Area. So Walt Harris was a huge guy, and my co-host for a number of years was Ann Calvello, who was like the Moolah of roller derby, the lead heel. Yeah. She skated in 7 decades, equaling what Lou Thez did in wrestling. Only Lou Thez did his thing in wrestling that long. But Annie would bring all of the derby stars, from Joni Weston to Jan Valla to Sherry Eric to Nick Scopus to Buddy Atkinson Sr. I know
Ronnie O'Connell, Ronnie Robinson. Yeah,
a lot of those names, Larry Lee, all of those guys would come in, plus some of the roller game stars out of Los Angeles, who I used to cover at the Olympic Auditorium in the 70s, Judy Sawinski and folks like that, Ronnie Washington and Skinny Minnie Gwen Miller, all of those. So we would have half, because Walt Harris drew in the derby and the wrestlers, I would have all the wrestlers I brought in, meaning Kenji Shibuya, Pepper Gomez, Woody would come, Jerry Monty would come, it said Mitsu Arakawa, and Red Bastien if he was in town. And I know Al probably remembers Red Bastien teaming with Billy Redlines in the AWA. They were AWA tag champions, feuding with the Vachons, and I think the Blackjacks, when the Blackjacks, Heenan first paired them up there.
Is there a question you got going there, Mike? Otherwise, we can.
This. How did the two Allans meet? Allan Bolte and Al Burke. How did you guys meet?
Good question. Don't hold your hand out like it's like I'm supposed to answer this. It just happened. Al promoted a couple shows in LA. He wanted me to come announce one of his battle royals, which I was unable to, and it did very well. We've always kept in touch throughout the years. I'm sure I did an article on Outrageous in Wrestling World. Yes,
you did.
Yes, and you would help with some pictures and all that. This is going way back, and since then, Al, you have done a lot of skits in different movies and such.
Film and TV. He's done. He's got. If you go to his IMDb, you'll see a ton of stuff, right, Al?
No, I've got almost 300 credits. I mean, when I got the Reel Award at the CAC, I talked about the number one person with the most credits that has already received the Reel Award was Judo Gene LaBelle.
Right.
He was the top dog, and second place was Rowdy Roddy Piper. And then I was told, you're right in between the two of them on IMDb alone.
Wow.
And so that's what got me into the running for the Reel Award. And I mean, like I said, even to be mentioned in the same breath as those guys, I mean, those guys are legends. I mean, they're iconic figures that, they're known almost worldwide. And, for me to be even mentioned, I'm truly honored and blessed.
Well, that's great. What do you feel is your favorite role that you've had in the many ones that you? What one do you feel is the most notable?
I go back to the music videos where I've done maybe 700, 800, possibly even 900. I've lost count, but I've got many Grammy winners, things like that. From Pharrell Williams to Eminem to Toby Keith, who was the music video of the year for Country Music Station. I've been blessed. I mean, I don't know that I could really pick one. I mean, my biggest payday, of course, has been The Wedding Singer, where I was just left with one line. I defended Billy Idol on the airplane and got Robbie and Julia together. And to this day, I still get paid 4 checks every year. I have since I shot it, and I think that was 95. So that's been an awesome payday, I have to admit. So, for money-wise, that's probably the most memorable, and that's where a lot of people know me from. But the kids nowadays, they don't even know what The Wedding Singer is. They have no idea. But I mentioned like a Billie Eilish, who I did one of her first videos before she won all of her Grammys. And it was just her and I in the video. And I ended up on my Instagram, picked up 15 to 20,000 of her followers on my Instagram because of her. And I think I even posted maybe as many as 50 not cartoons, but drawings or caricatures that her fans did of Billy and I. So, it's kind of been fun. Most of them are out of this country, but that's, as my popularity grows because of somebody else. Yeah, I've been on a good road.
Let me say this too, so Russ understands. When you say Reels Award, that was the award that we were giving when we were, Cauliflower Alley, when it was initially formed 50 some odd years ago, 53, 55, was a third wrestlers, a third boxers, a third movie and TV stars. So right. Reels as a reel of film, that's what Al Burke got his first award for, movie and TV legend. And then this year at CAC, it moved to Vegas in 2000 when Carl Lauer decided to move it there after our co-founder, Art Abrams, passed away, who wanted it always in LA. Well, Carl moves it to Vegas. But this year at CAC, was it a men's wrestling award? What was your second Cauliflower Alley?
No, you mentioned it was my first one. That was actually my second one. Was the Reel Award, the REEL.
The Reel. Okay, so the one you got this year was the Reels Award.
That is correct, and it was 11 years ago, I believe. I think it was 2012. I got the Humanitarian Award for the CAC for all the charities that I've done throughout the years. So,
well, let's talk about some of those charities.
I've been with Special Olympics probably pushing 40 years now. Most of the athletes only know me as Mr. Outrageous. I usually bring a belt or 2 or 3. One of the things I will not do is ever put the belt on me at a charity event. Everybody else could wear it. You could wear it. I don't care who wears it. I just won't. I tell them, this is your time. It's not mine. I wear this for work. You can wear it for fun.
It's not a lot of bookers think that way.
Well, that's true, but
that's any of them do.
Made me different, I guess. And but being able to do Special Olympics, I've done muscular dystrophy. I actually, Middle California, I drove up and did a burn camp where everybody was severely burnt. I didn't know if I could do it. I mean, I got up there and I was really scared. I didn't know if I could handle it. And, when you go to hug somebody and their skin is like an alligator or a crocodile from being burnt so badly. I mean, that's a true gut check, and it was for me. And but I've done cancer wards, kids dying of cancer. I've done 3 Make-A-Wishes. 2 out of the 3 died within days of my visit. I mean, those are heart-wrenching. And, you know, I hate to get the call, but I also can't say no. I have to go.
That's very that's so. What Fed are you working with right now, or are you still doing any promotional stuff, any booking, any actual Feds?
Wrestling, film and TV, and charity work.
Yeah, wrestling not so much. They're talking. I met some people from British Columbia at the CAC that want me to come up there, and I told them I won't wrestle anymore. Just as the pandemic started, I retired for the second time out of Toronto. I met some people from Toronto. They asked if I'd come work, and I thought, you know, this is a good reason to get my fat butt in shape and go ahead and see if I still got it. Well, I realized, you know, I did 5 matches up there over a year, and I was okay by the end, but I know I wasn't anywhere near what I should be. And so I was happy to just say, no more, I'm done. You know, if you want me to come in and be a special guest referee or something like that, you know, I mean, I still love taking my bumps. I mean, that was always my specialty. So, you know, I have no problem doing that, but I'm not going to take a lot of them.
Yeah, I want to ask Allan, though, something about bumps, because I've never asked him this. I was there at our KCOP TV in Hollywood when Dick Lane accidentally took a bump, similar to Gordon Soley when Morocco didn't mean to, and, you know, Piper had to get involved and turn babyface, whatever year that was, 1980, 81. But Allan, did you ever take a bump either intentionally or accidentally?
I knew where this was leading. Actually, not really. Long time ago, you remember Angela Mosca?
Right.
Was playing here. I think it was in Stockton, I believe. Patterson was there, told him, fall out of the ring, knock over Bolte, knock him over his chair, knock him on his back, land on top of him. I had no idea. It did happen. And he was just so careful. I mean, he's a huge guy, 275, 290. And when I saw him coming out a little too late, and boom, boom, boom. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the chair on the ground, and he's on top of me. But I hardly hurt. I mean, it was really, but no, I haven't really been.
Well, that was the thing. He was in the Canadian Football League, so he was a huge name athlete.
Yes, yeah. He never really did too well here. Shire brought him into the territory. He lasted maybe 6 months, 8 months, if that. But yeah, he was a pretty big name at that time.
I have something, and this relates to Al growing up, Al Burke in the AWA, was when Mosca he was actually rooming with Ray Stevens when they were working for Vern Gagne's AWA. And Mosca was, like Chris Tolis, an amazing chef. He would cook for all the boys. But Ray Stevens specifically said, I got to eat his food all the time. You know, he made sandwiches and stuff, gourmet sandwiches in the car for us. They were on the road, and those AWA road trips were hellish. Al probably knows, you know, particularly in the winter. And so Mosca and our own Ray Stevens were longtime best buds. And at the one and only, and Al Burke was, I hope he was there, but because the Cauliflower Alley you said was your first, it wasn't the one that the one and only time Sherry Martel came, or was that your first CAC in LA?
The very first one, I think it was 92. Sherry brought me over. Sherry and I had been friends for a while, and she had me come over, and I went to her hotel room, and then, you know, so that was my very first one, and I joined right after that.
That was at the Sportsman's Lodge. I spent the whole afternoon. She told me to hang with her while she was getting her hair done.
Yeah.
And remember, I'll send you the photos, because you remember she had that sparkly purple dress she wore on WWF TV when she got her CAC award. But Angela Mosca came only once to CAC in '96 when Ray was there, and Barry Blaustein was filming Beyond the Mat. Never used any of that footage. I think that was on the extras of the DVD. But Barry Blaustein, who hired me, I was a still photographer all the years of pre-production for Beyond the Mat. But at that CAC, he had me grab and get Pat Patterson, Bockwinkel, Ray Stevens, Mosca, Ted DiBiase Sr., Keenan, and Tiger Conway Sr. had them all in that room, and he's just interviewing them. But Mosca and Ray Stevens, the best of friends, they sat next to each other, rekindling all that stuff. And so that was great stuff. And then Sherry at the CAC, Sherry Martel. Anyway, let me, Russ, throw back to you.
Oh, well, I wanted to find out from Allan, you've given announcing all throughout California. What's your favorite venue of all the ones that you've announced at?
Oh boy, it has to be the Cow Palace.
Yeah, the Crown.
That's so huge. San Francisco, 18,000.
Roy called it the Crown Jewel backstage.
Yes, yeah. Yes. And Patterson in his book, if you remember, made the comment that of all the venues he's wrestled in his career, literally all over the world, he said the Cow Palace, to walk from the dressing room to the ring, was the longest walk, longer than Madison Square Garden. The Cow Palace dressing room, when you entered through the back, you had to go up about 20 stairs, and then there was all the dressing rooms. So when your match was on, you had to walk down all those stairs, all forward till you get to the back of the arena, all down the arena to the ring, 18,000 seat arena. And he always said that was as Pat would say, that was the longest fucking walk I ever had to do of any arena. Pat would always say, let's have a drink or 10.
But Allan, you announced, we were just talking about that before the show started. Obviously, from 1973 until Roy closed shop. Yes. Was that after, I always mix it up, was that after his very last Battle Royal with all the Florida stars, and it was really packed. 5, the current NWA champion and 4 previous NWA champs. John Tullis, Ernie Ladd in the opening match against Ron Starr. But it was January 81 or January 82?
I think 82.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes.
You announced pretty much the majority or the longest tenured in different spurts for Roll Up
and Hank Renner. Yeah. So Hank Renner did Channel 40, TV 40, when they were filming there every Monday night. And he announced the live Sacramento house shows every other week. And John Swensky did San Jose every other week. And then I announced pretty much everywhere else. Cow Palace, Santa Rosa, Stockton every other week, Richmond Auditorium, Fresno once in a while. Yeah, the whole territory, and doing the programs and all that at the same time. When Terry Garvin came in and promoted toward the end there actually were 13, Shire had 13 spot shows, Yuba City, that they'd go once a year. Right. And they would pack all of it. Not just Santa Rosa, but up in Sonora, Yuba City, Waif, Gilroy, Salinas. We were on the road all the time. And
now, let me have grab some. You were going to show some programs and posters because I can't see them on the screen. It's so tiny. And while I'm going to say that, Allan also was the voice of APW, All Pro Wrestling, for many, many, many years. Obviously, pretty much the whole entire extent of BTW until Kirk White died or before that.
Yes. Yeah. And Kirk, BTW, I do want to say, maybe name some of the guys throughout the years who were flown into Northern California for the Fan Fest, like Ric Flair, Roddy Piper,
Bret Hart,
Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Pat Patterson, Rocky Johnson, who a lot of people don't know is The Rock's father, that The Rock's father was a big name wrestler before The Rock came in. Just so many big names, Gold Dust, Dusty Rhodes. And here's a little shot that was taken on the Cow Palace. That's me, Cody Rhodes, Kevin Sullivan. You remember Kevin Sullivan? You can see that pretty much.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Nice.
Allan, is that my shot? I took of you guys up there before they let the fans in. I think it's my shot, or unless you had somebody take it when I post everybody.
I always like to credit you, and you've done unbelievable stuff. But I don't think so. I don't think this one. I don't think you were there that night.
I was there for that thing. I was the one that was shooting. I was there. That was the first of the 2 Marcus Mack Cow Palace shows.
There you go. And they drew pretty well, considering at the Cow Palace that Mike Leno did most everything. Here's one of Bret the Hitman Hart and me. This was at a BTW event, another fan fest. I have a couple more programs here, a couple more posters. We'll try to see that. There we go. There's Patterson.
Posters, right? Bring them up to the camera, Alan, because those were Horwinski printers. Was the one that did for wrestling and the roller derby. Jerry.
Yeah, those are real classics. Oops.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see this Patterson. That was in August of '70. Yeah, way back. 6-man tag, Shibuya. This is going way back, and that's when I first started announcing as well. Richmond Auditorium. They ran there every couple months.
The film is it's The Rock's grandfather, Peter Mavia. Who's the final name? Klondike Bill?
Yes. Peter Mavia, Pepper Gomez.
Let me guess who took the fall in that one.
Yes.
Probably Klondike Bill.
Irish Klondike Bill. Peter Mavia, when he first came out to the big time.
And the masked mummy. Who was the masked mummy?
That was Tony Galarza.
Oh, because the mummy in L.A. was Benny Ramirez.
Right. They kind of changed.
He was, there were several mummies.
Yes. And here's a good shot of Patterson and me when he went into the Fan Fest for BTW.
A little bit of glare on that one. We can't quite see it.
Okay.
Oh, you had it for a sec. There, that's good.
Good.
Nice.
And Alan, who got Kirk White, Pat Patterson, who hooked that all up, and then I got stiffed on the
Well, that's quite a story. I want to mention it. So Mike Leno
doesn't know, but every year for a number of years for these little mini fan fests that Kirk White would do in NorCal, he could never afford all the TV and radio and print PR I got for his fan fest for a lousy $150. Like our ESPN affiliate on a 50,000 watt KNBR. I got Brett on there a number of times. We brought Pat Patterson in, Roddy Piper.
And Mike, when Patterson came in, you did so much publicity for him. Pat was on Channel 7, in the Chronicle, on the radio.
Channel 4 we brought him into Radnich, not just KNBR, because when we get done with all these guys at KNBR, like Brett, Piper, Just Incredible, Piper, and Pat, we would take him then. Gary Radnich, who was my friend was the sports guy, Russ remembers, at Channel 4, Cron, even when it was an NBC affiliate, he would have me bring in. So I'd bring them all in. And so we had Pat and Piper and Brett on there. Channel 2, ATVU.
Yes. And then they really they packed it.
Never have afforded any of that PR. No. But the last time he gave me the runaround, and then he gave me the stall delay. I never got my 150, so I never did PR for him again.
Yeah, and I don't blame you.
Up with Pat Patterson, then I get stiff, but that's wrestling. And Al Burke,
did a tremendous job on all the publicity, Mike. I think you even picked Pat up at the airport, if I remember.
Well, we did with the guy that did the French champagne drinking. What was that guy?
The Emperor.
Yeah,
Emperor
Tom,
yes.
Tom, who did the training.
Yes.
When Apes and Styles had his little, he broke away from Kirk.
Yeah.
Russ, did you ever see Lay Emperor? I don't know if you ever saw his work, because he started at an LA thing that came up incredibly.
Yeah, no, I remember Lay Emperor. He was corny, kind of a corny gimmick, but not really amazing.
He started,
in the ring.
Yeah, because Albert, I don't know if you would, with the time frame of when you moved to SoCal from like Minnesota, where you were living prior to that, but Johnny Legend was putting on a lot of lucha / wrestling with
incredibly strange wrestling.
I don't know if that name rings a bell. Johnny Legend produced the two documentaries with Blassie along with Johnny Legend's sister, but the 4-track Blassie album that came out around 75. Does that name ring a bell, Al Burke, to you, Johnny Legend?
I know Johnny Legend, but I wasn't here for any of those shows. I don't. I got here and went to work for Carl Lauer in '91.
So let me ask you, and Allan may not know this either. You were working on Carl's California Championship Wrestling, which was syndicated.
On whose?
Were you weren't you part of Carl Lauer's TV show that ran for 2 to 3 years?
No, I was not. I came in just after that.
Oh, okay. But he was doing other things since he had a wrestling license in California, like a couple of lucha shows that he partnered with at the Olympic.
Right.
Chavo Guerrero Jr. made his debut on one of them, teaming with Mondo and Luis Piccoli, the late Luis Piccoli.
Yeah.
So, Al,
story. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you more about your fighting background, because you said you did karate and you also did bare knuckle fighting.
Yeah.
And how did you get involved in that? And what was the story behind all that? How far did you advance in karate? I would assume you got a black belt.
I ended up just a brown belt, black stripe, so I was one away. But I just decided, at that point that I was going into wrestling. But I had done Golden Glove boxing out of high school. I was a 2-time Minneapolis City champion, went on to the Upper Midwest, and each time I lost to the guy that went to the Nationals. From there, then I decided to give bare knuckle underground fighting a try. I ended up winning both of my fights.
Now, let me rewind that a second. You decided to give bare knuckle fighting a try.
Right.
Now, you make that more like, the way people decide to buy a Honda or they buy a Toyota. It's that there's a little bit more to, being beaten by bare knuckles than you give it a try. Why did you decide to give it a try?
I've always been adventurous, been the tough guy. I tell people I have fought my whole life, basically. I think the first time I was in the gym as a boxer was before 10 years old. So my whole life has been kind of a fight. That's why when I went into wrestling, and now it's like, geez, it's a work, But, then it became more fun. But at that point, I didn't start wrestling until I think I was 33. So, I was quite late to the game there, but always been athletic and very physical. And, the bare knuckle fighting, it's like, why not? I'm a bouncer in a bar. I fight almost every night.
I could give like 1,000 reasons why not, but continue. Yes.
But no, for me, it's like, okay, let's do this, and it was just another one of those adventures for me. But then, you get screwed on money. I'm like, okay, I'm not here for that. And so I just, as soon as I went to confront the promoter, both of his muscles peeled their jackets open, and they're both carrying weapons. I'm like, fine, yeah.
Wow, where did that happen?
That was in Minneapolis.
Really?
Wow.
Well, actually, it was St. Paul. It was the sister city, but
So outrageous. Did you get screwed on some of the payoffs?
just those two. I got screwed by one promoter in wrestling in 37 years, and. Wow. So that's, I figured that's not too bad for all the stories I've heard.
And Mike, you and I have talked about this. I will say one thing. All the years of announcing that I did and all the promoters I worked for, can you believe not one ever stiffed me on a payoff? Even Shire's last day mailed me a check 2 weeks later, and he could have screwed everybody over. And that never has happened.
Wow, that's pretty. That's good.
Oh, wow, because you hear all the stories.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Well, I don't think Roy. Well, there was the thing with Frankie Kane, Great Mephisto, where he got upset for pay. I'm not sure. Were you even there for that? And can you even tell?
That was a little bit before me.
Because what happened? Yeah, that's right. Because you came in immediately after.
Yeah. Because
Vic Berry left with
yes.
Frankie Kane, but Great Mephisto was complaining about getting stiffed or just getting shorted on his envelope.
Right. I heard he was complaining that his pay wasn't enough.
Not yeah, he stepped Roy in front of the boys in the back.
So then, there was a fight of some sort, yes.
And then took off. And Roy seemed to be kind of a spitfire. He had a temper at times, and I saw him out and scream at guys like twice Woody Farmer backstage. I saw him yell and scream.
Yes. I remember one time in Sacramento, some fans, I don't know what happened, but 2 fans were basically thrown out, and security was having a problem getting them out, and Shire was in the back of the venue where the wrestlers hang and such. I remember Shire kicking both of them at once and throwing them out the back door, saying, "Get the fuck out of here." I remember that so vividly, and I'm standing there like, "Whoa, Roy."
How often let me ask Allan, though, before we go back to Al Burke, how often did Roy go to non-Cow Palace venues? Was it a rarity, or was it
show up quite a bit? He went to every Sacramento, every Cow Palace for sure.
Yeah, every Cow Palace.
Show up once in a great while in Stockton. He would show up out of the blue in San Jose, and nobody liked it when he showed up, because it was like, okay, here's the Godfather showing up, watching us, make sure we're, they were very uncomfortable when he would show it at some of the smaller cities unexpectedly. Even Louis Miller, his main promoter, Lou Whitson, they didn't really like it when he would show up out of nowhere and check on things. And, he even had his wife, Dorothy, read the programs. And if there was a typo or anything, she would get right back to Roy with it.
Were there different programs that you made for the different venues, or was the main one?
The main one was, there was one for the Cow Palace, and then we would insert that night's lineup. Yeah. And I remember one time I messed up and I printed the program for Sacramento first, and Shire had a fit. He says, "Don't you ever forget, the fucking Cow Palace is the fucking plum. You started the fucking Cow Palace, not Sacramento." I said, "I didn't know, Roy." Okay. And the programs were very profitable. I think I made at least $1,000 at every battle royal back then, which is like 3,000-4,000 now or more. It was a real good profit.
And Al Burke probably remembers, depending on the territory, like Florida or St. Louis, they let the fans just come right up to the ring and ask the wrestlers to sign their programs. But in other venues, that was not allowed in LA. I don't recall seeing that at any San Francisco nor Cal. Al, did you see that in the AWA or anywhere else you saw wrestling?
Yeah, quite a few different places. A guy I worked for 8 years out of Denver, the IWA, Tom Shade. Yeah, he never had barriers, so we were always dealing with the fans. They would try to trip you if you were doing a run around the ring or something. And so I was always very aware of that stuff. So, my steel toe boots went right to their ankle bone.
Tom Shade did a lot of Army-based shows, didn't he?
Yes.
We did a lot of
just 1 second. Now that we mentioned that, yes, you wrestled. We did 4 or 5 shows with Tom Shade at military bases, and heads off to Psycho Johnny Payne, who worked some of those events, who still works from time to time. We all keep in touch with. Yeah, Tom Shade, he ran at Travis Air Force Base, I believe, and 4 or 5 times. He brought in Paul Orndorff.
Some of those shows too, Allan?
Pardon?
Sonny Stone, it was another NorCal guy that worked for Woody.
Yes, Sonny Stone.
Russ probably remembers some of those names. And Super Diablo was a little bit later, but he was like a second generation. He had his whole family, his dad, his uncle.
Yeah.
And he not only worked for Roland's group, but some of the other ones, because Jerry Monty was still promoting while Roland got APW off the ground.
Oh.
Allan, did you have more posters or programs to show us, or like some of the programs? And earlier you mentioned Wrestling World, and Russ may not remember Wrestling World. That was a magazine, and you did the column, or no, you did the West Coast report.
Yes, I had the West Coast scene.
Yeah.
But you also did, Allan also did separate articles apart from that.
Yes, Wrestling Confidential, The Ring Wrestling, Wrestling Review, a lot of the magazines. Here's one of the Battle Royals, 18-man Battle Royal.
Which year was that? Can you tell? Or does it have?
I'm going to guess 80, 81. There, in fact, is that Terry Funk there, I believe?
And that was
Star Billy Graham.
Yeah, that's Ed Wiskowski in the center, isn't it?
That's Superstar Billy Graham in the center.
Oh, I can't tell because it's so small.
Yeah.
Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty Rhodes. There you go. That's right. And then here is a program, the actual program from that event, the Cow Palace event. Let's see if I can.
But Dusty was in that battle royal. That was Roy's
Yes,
last.
Dusty Rhodes was in that.
Pat won. I can tell you the order. It was
Let's see.
it was Pat, Dick Slater, Terry Funk, and Dusty. Those are the last four guys in it.
Yeah, and they packed the Cow Palace. Every battle royal was a huge sellout a week ahead of time.
And Tom, excuse me, Al,
Yeah.
Andre, Roy had often would bring in. He'd have Haystack Calhoun, Andre, sometimes the McCreary twins, who were the Guinness Book of World Record heaviest twins.
Heaviest, yes.
And even Man Mountain Mike. So you would have the 5 traveling attractions all in one Cow Palace Roy Shire show.
And I remember when he brought in Ernie Ladd, football player.
Yeah, or Ernie had a long stint, obviously in '71 feuding with Pat, but then he on the last Battle Royal show, he's in the opening match, a guy of that caliber with Ron Starr, the tag match from Florida, which was the Funks against Mike Graham and Dusty. That was an undercard match. Dusty Rhodes, an undercard match.
And then after the Battle Royal, there would be 6 or 7 other matches. Here's the back of the program.
Remembers Vern Gagne's Battle Royals, like most territories, they were the main event.
Oh,
But
yeah.
Shire had them at the beginning because a lot of the wrestlers were going and coming to or from Japan, and they wanted to go hit San Francisco Airport to fly out quickly.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Roy just simply explained them leaving and not being able to make their later match as quote unquote getting injured in the Battle Royal. But usually the winner of the Battle Royal would face Harley Race at the end, the last few years. And Pat, only time he ever wrestled Harley Race for the NWA title in a singles match was that last Cow Palace Battle Royal.
Yeah, and here's a Wrestling World. This is way, way back. I think I did an article on the Hart Foundation, I believe. This was 86.
Wow.
Wrestling World. They published from 1959. They were the longest
So hot.
wrestling until about 89 or 90 is when they ceased. Do you remember, Mike, at one time there were 13
Yeah.
national wrestling magazines on the newsstands everywhere? Yes.
This is
Monthly or bi-monthly.
I
And
can
now
name,
there's like 13 million pro wrestling sites and
I
blogs.
know,
So
I know.
I can name the magazines. There was Ring Wrestling, there was Wrestling World, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Wrestling Guide, Big Book of Wrestling,
Yeah.
Wrestling Superstars, and Tommy K's, what was it, Big Book of Wrestling.
Big Book of Wrestling, Inside Wrestling. Here's Roddy Piper.
Well, we're winding up. I want to make sure you guys get your plugs in. Let's start with Al. He's got massive social media, all kinds of social media. But Al, let's let you plug away for a couple of minutes. Anywhere, your social media, any charities you'd like to plug?
My
Project.
main one is probably Instagram, and it's Al Burke, all one word, and then it's 4782. That's where I'm taking most of my people. Facebook, I save that more for the acting world, so that's more directors and people I've worked with, things like that in Hollywood. But yeah, mostly the Instagram, and I try to respond to everybody. Like I mentioned earlier, you know, if people are willing to give me their time, I'm always happy to give back some of mine. So,
Well, you know,
but
I got to ask you, we didn't get to, who broke you in, though? Who was the one or several that broke you in?
well, that was Dan Rignotti. He was working as Terminator Riggs,
Right.
because they're personal friends, and they had already been in the business, I believe, 2 or 3 years, maybe a little bit longer, when I finally decided that I would go ahead and give it a try. And there were 3 Terminators that all were part of training me, but Dan Rignotti was the main one. And out of all 3 of them combined, I outlasted all 3 of them in my career of 37 years. So,
Well, one of the Terminators was Joe Laurinaitis' Animal's brother, Mark, right?
well, he claims he was his brother, but it wasn't.
Wasn't a legit brother, but
No,
Eddie
it wasn't.
Sharkey, who I've known as well as his his brother, who I did a hotline with. Eddie Sharkey was like one of the premier trainers, like a Stu Hart. But Eddie, I mean, tons of guys from Jesse Ventura, Rick Rude, so many, Medusa, Debbie Michelli, so many came out of the genius who was Eddie Sharkey, and still a great guy. I forget the last couple of times you went to CAC? You probably saw Eddie Sharkey.
He was there 2 or 3 years ago, I think, was the last time I saw him.
Yeah, I don't think he went during the various COVID years.
Now, the only reason, even though I got trained by his head trainer, Dan Rignati, Eddie didn't have a ring at the time to do his wrestling camp. So Dan says, I can't train you that way. I've got to train you right. So he went to Jim Mitchell. If you remember the old Iron Duke, you know, he was missing a couple of fingers.
Yeah.
And he had a ring. So they worked out a deal between Dan and him. And so that's where I was trained. In fact, at the last CAC, I mentioned to Medusa that she had popped in one day when I was at camp. She was, I believe, had just got back from Japan, and you know, I was like, oh wow, this is a badass chick, you know, this is cool. So but yeah, that was how I started, and yeah, I just, you know, luckily I had a lot of ring experience, so I fell fairly naturally into the, you know, the ring part of it. The wrestling, it, you know, it took me quite a while, and I was a crowbar in the beginning, especially coming out of boxing and karate.
Of course.
And but no, you know, I ended up becoming one of the lightest guys in the business. So you know, I can be thankful, and I thank Dan Rignati for that, because he put on a goofy suit where he came out and worked with me in my very first match, and my first match back in the old, you know, AWA days was the Ninjas. So I worked as one of the Ninjas because of my karate background. And
got it. So Allan, it's always great to see you again. I miss working shows with you.
And Mike, outrageous, great to see you. I don't have anything to plug really. My email, a funny story about that, it's supposed to be kayfabe at AOL, and somebody else took the proper spelling of kayfabe at that time. So it's KEYFABE at AOL. And you know what they say about if you have AOL, we all do, that means you're old school. If you have AOL, you're old. That's what I always hear.
Yeah, this AOL email since '93.
Yeah, but they were huge. Remember, they were the first internet service provider. And
it was AOL, CompuServe, and Prodigy.
Yes.
That's probably... Yeah. And I was helping run the grandstand on AOL and also working with Bob Ryder at Prodigy. I forget who ran wrestling the boards on CompuServe at the time, but Russ, I'm sure, was in, you know, computers and all of that stuff at that time. But the grandstand on AOL, we had forums and I had to oversight them.
I remember those.
Yes, Sika, Joe Pedicino, Missy Hyatt. Later, we had some of the ECW stars like Blue Meanie.
I remember paying $3 an hour.
Well, yes, yeah, absolutely.
But
plus
I do
local
think
dialect charges.
One thing we all need to contribute to, one thing, and that's the Jose Cuervo Fund. That's what I like. Al,
very good.
You agree?
I agree.
Very good, guys. Hey, it's really wonderful having you on. We'd certainly love to have you on in the future. And thank you so much for being here tonight. We'll see everyone next week.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Combate Kurastai, everybody. Thank you, Al. Thank you, Allan.
No problem. Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys.